Hello and welcome to this Foster Care Institute online training webinar. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD, Part 1, Understanding the Disorder. I'm your host, Dr. John DeGarmo, founder and director of the Foster Care Institute. I'm an author of several foster care books, international speaker and trainer, and a foster parent to over 60 plus children myself. Indeed, over the years, my wife and I have had several children come through our home and placed with our family who have suffered from ADHD in some fashion. Our goal during this webinar is to increase your awareness of what attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, otherwise commonly known as ADHD, what it is, and how it affects children and youth. And our key objectives are to increase your awareness of what ADHD is and gain understanding of what the signs, the symptoms, and the possible causes of ADHD look like. Throughout this webinar, we're going to hear from some parents who have children and youth with ADHD. Our first parent says this: the hardest thing about ADHD is that it's invisible to outsiders. People just assume that we are not being good parents and that our child is a brat when they don't have an idea of how exhausted we truly are. This is from parent SC. Let's look at that last statement again there. When they don't have an idea how exhausted we truly are. Indeed, caring for a youth with ADHD, looking after them, supervising them, monitoring them, working with them, can truly be exhausting in several ways. Now, first, let's look at what ADHD is. And our first definition comes to us from kidshealth.org. And it says this: ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is a medical condition. A person with ADHD has differences in brain development and brain activity that affects attention, the ability to sit still, and self-control. ADHD can affect a child at school, at home, and in friendships. Again, this first definition comes to us from kidshealth.org. The Center for Disease Control, or the CDC, says this about ADHD. ADHD is generally diagnosed in children by the time they're teenagers, with the average age for moderate ADHD diagnosis being 7 years old. And again, thanks to the Center for Disease Control for this definition. Let's go further. It is estimated that about 4 to 12% of children in our society have ADHD. Now, this may startle you. 12%, which means roughly 1 in 10 perhaps may have ADHD. Boys are 2 to 3 times more likely to have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder than girls. Many studies suggest that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a generational one. It is commonly found in brothers and sisters within the same family. Let's look at what another parent says about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Even close family members don't understand. They think that my daughter's just spoiled. They don't spend countless hours reading and researching and trying different things to find what works and what doesn't. And this is from CA. Now, what is ADHD? Youth in foster care are 3 times more likely to have ADHD than children and youth from traditional families. Youth in foster care who have experienced trauma are often misdiagnosed with ADHD due to the trauma and anxiety that they have experienced and they have suffered from. More than 1 in 4 children between the ages of 2 and 17 who were in foster care have received an ADHD diagnosis. Now, this is compared to about 1 in 14 of all children in Medicaid. Let's look at that again. More than 1 in 4, which means more than 25% of children who are in foster care have received an ADHD diagnosis. So it's most likely that the youth that you are caring for, the youth you are working with, roughly 1 in 4 has been diagnosed with ADHD. Going further, among youth with an ADHD diagnosis, those youth in foster care, those youth placed in a foster care environment or a foster care setting, were as likely as others to be treated with ADHD medication, but were more likely to have received psychological services. In addition, about 3 out of 4 youth, 75%, with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, in foster care have received some psychological care as well. The Center for Disease Control tells us that children with ADHD who were in foster care were also more likely to have another disorder, with roughly half of these children and youth diagnosed also with conditions such as oppositional defiant disorder, depression, or anxiety. Now, this is compared to about 1 in 3 children with ADHD in Medicaid who were not in foster care. And again, this is from the Center for Disease and Control. Just like in foster care in general, there are so many myths and misconceptions about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. There is the myth that ADHD is not a real medical condition. The truth is, the CDC, the National Institute for Health, and others all recognize that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a medical condition. There is the myth that ADHD is a learning disability of some kind. The truth is this. Now, while attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can indeed be an additional challenge to the learning process, ADHD is not a learning disability. A child, a youth, someone with a learning disability can also have ADHD. So a youth that you are caring for can not only have a learning disability, it can also have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder as well. There is the myth that those who have ADHD need to work harder. They are simply lazy. The truth is, those youth with ADHD often try as hard as they can to overcome this disorder. The brain is structured differently for youth and children and adults, for all who have ADHD, than those who do not have ADHD. Let's look at that last sentence again. The brain is structured differently than those who do not have ADHD. The brain is structured differently. This is important and key to remember. There is the myth that those with ADHD are unable to focus. Truth is, those with ADHD do have difficulty focusing. Yet, they can indeed focus upon something that may interest them with something known as hyperfocus. There is a myth that those with ADHD will outgrow it, that youth will outgrow ADHD. The truth is different. Adults do not grow out of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Some symptoms may change as they grow older, and adults may find ways to better manage ADHD or the disorder, but they never outgrow it. There is the myth that only boys will ever get ADHD. The truth is this: boys are twice as likely to have ADHD over girls. At the same time, girls are more often overlooked or are undiagnosed with the condition. There is a myth that those with ADHD are always hyperactive. The truth is, there are three types of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and they all do not include hyperactivity as a symptom. And the final myth is that bad parenting is the main contributor to children and youth with ADHD. The truth is, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is a condition of the brain. It is a medical condition. It is not a bad parenting contributor. We've looked at what some of the myths and truths about ADHD are. Now let's look at some of the causes of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. What causes ADHD? Well, in truth, the causes for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are mostly unknown. There are some studies that suggest that it may be genetic. Some studies suggest that it is a brain-based biological disorder. The disorder may also run in the family, so to speak, so it may be a condition that is diagnosed in both the parents and the child and youth of the same family. In addition, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder may also result in a significant head injury. But let's step back again one moment to the previous slide. Again, look at the first one there. The causes for ADHD are mostly unknown. Now, we mentioned earlier that there are three types of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Let's look at those. The most common form of ADHD is ADHD combined type. And an ADHD combined type is often characterized by a youth who has impulsive behavior in addition to having hyperactivity behavior. And this youth who has ADHD combined type may show signs of inattention and distraction. ADHD impulsive hyperactive type is the least common of ADHD. It is characterized by impulsive behavior as well as hyperactive behavior. And those with ADHD impulsive hyperactive type do not show signs of inattention and distraction. And finally, there is the ADHD inattentive distractible type. Now, those who suffer from this often show signs mainly of inattention and are often distracted. So, what is the diagnosis of ADHD? Well, attention deficit hyperactive disorder is most often diagnosed by a child psychiatrist. It may also be diagnosed by a pediatrician and other qualified mental health professionals. Now, this diagnosis consists mainly of family history, observations of a child's behavior, and finally, psychoeducational tests. So the diagnosis consists of three things. Again, the history of the family, observing the child's behavior, and psychoeducational tests. Let's look at what another parent says. I wish people simply knew that ADHD is so much more than just being hyper. This is from Parent SS. And I feel this is an important statement. Let's read it one more time. I wish people simply knew that ADHD is so much more than just being hyper. Indeed it is. Let's look at some of the signs of ADHD. If you are working with a youth who has been diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, what are some of those signs? What are some of those symptoms? Well, to begin with, some of the signs consist of this. Youth who is suffering from ADHD is often unable to stick to the task that they are assigned. Tasks that are tedious, tasks that are time-consuming, tasks that are monotonous. Many tasks that are in school that are time-consuming. They're unable to stick to these assignments. Tasks that are work-related within the home. They're unable often to stick to these tasks. Another sign of ADHD is that the youth is unable or appears to be unable to listen or to carry out instructions. So if you're working with youth and they often seem unable to listen to your instructions, perhaps they are suffering from ADHD. Those youth who are suffering from ADHD often change activities or they change their tasks often. And they have difficulty organizing their tasks. They have difficulty in organizational skills. Youth who suffer from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder have considerable difficulty in concentrating, have difficulty in focusing, and have difficulty with tasks that demand their full attention. As you can imagine, school will be very, very challenging for them. In addition to this, those youth who have ADHD often struggle with listening. They may daydream, and they often shift their attention and focus to other issues instead of the task that is before them. Now, this may result in a child or youth seeming to be forgetful, seeming to be inattentive, or seeming to be absent-minded at times. This comes to us from the Foster Care Survival Guide. In addition, or along with this, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, may also result in a child or youth often acting rashly or acting in an impulsive manner. Their emotional reactions may seem overly dramatic or overly intense to a situation that you feel does not need an overly dramatic or intense reaction. Furthermore, those who have ADHD may interrupt others, may find it difficult to wait until it is their turn, or may be talking to others in an impulsive fashion. Again, this comes to us from the Foster Care Survival Guide. These youth who rush to do things without seeking permission, without thinking it through, this is a sign of ADHD. Youth with ADHD may seem restless, hyperactive, or may become bored easier than other youth. They may struggle with sitting still. They may struggle with keeping quiet. They may struggle and disrupt others around them in doing so. Other signs of ADHD are youth who have a short attention span and are easily distracted. They make careless mistakes, like schoolwork and perhaps the chores or the tasks they are doing in their environment, in their home setting. Those with ADHD may be forgetful or tend to lose things. Youth who have ADHD may be unable to sit still, especially in a calm or a quiet environment or quiet or calm surrounding. They fidget often. Remember those little fidget toys? Those spinners, those spinner fidgets? Those are a good tool for those with ADHD. Those with ADHD often have difficulty concentrating on a task before them. Again, you can see why youth with ADHD struggle with school. They may have a great deal of physical movement. They interrupt others often. They have trouble waiting their turn. Those with ADHD often talk excessively. Those with ADHD are often unable to wait their turn. They're compulsive and act without thinking. They tend to interrupt others' conversations. They have no sense, or very, very little sense, of danger. Now, signs particular for ADHD for teens include this. They have trouble focusing on schoolwork and assignments. They have difficulty reading social cues from you or from others. They compromise easily with their tears, and they often have poor personal hygiene. Other signs, particular and especial for teens with ADHD, they do not wish to help or take part in family chores or with house chores. Teens who suffer from ADHD often have difficulty with time management as well as issues with driving. One parent says this: kids have a lot of gifts from their ADHD. Unending creativity, thinking outside the box, energy, enthusiasm, and passion about their interests. This comes to us from CJ. Now, there are other related conditions of ADHD. These include anxiety disorder. Youth with anxiety disorder may seem to be very worrisome, and they're very nervous much of the time. Now, this anxiety disorder may result in your youth having physical symptoms such as a rapid heartbeat, such as sweating, and dizziness. Another related condition is autistic spectrum disorder, ASD. The youth's social interaction, their communication, and their interests, as well as their behavior, are also affected. Conduct disorder is where the youth is often highly antisocial. Now, this conduct disorder may result in acts of fighting with others, with acts of stealing, vandalism of property, harming others, including people and animals. Again, this is known as conduct disorder, and it is a related condition of ADHD. Perhaps you are seeing this with some of the youth that you are working with. Epilepsy is a condition where the brain causes repeated fits and seizures. Oppositional defiant disorder, otherwise known as ODD, is another condition that's related to ADHD. Youth with oppositional defiant disorder show signs of negative and disruptive behavior. This behavior from ODD is especially displayed towards parents and parental figures or adults in their lives, perhaps you, teachers, and other adults of authority. Finally, and the last related condition of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is Tourette's syndrome. Tourette's syndrome is a nervous system condition which is characterized by a combination of involuntary noises and movements or tics. Perhaps you are familiar with Tourette's syndrome from a child or youth that you are working with who often swears impulsively. involuntarily. As you work with youth who suffer from ADHD, it is important to remember this. The youth that you are working with who suffer from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder are doing the best they can. They're not lazy. They're not bored. They're struggling. They're struggling mightily often. And they're doing the best they can. For much more about some of these conditions and anxieties related to attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, watch the following training webinars here at the Foster Care Institute. Trauma-Informed Parenting Part 1 and 2, Anxieties and Disorders, Anger Management, Child Development Part 1 and Part 2. If you're needing a little bit of inspiration as you care for and work with youth who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, looking for a little inspiration, check out the book, The Little Book of Foster Care Wisdom. 365 daily tips of inspiration and encouragement for foster carers. This might be the book that you need today. And we have many other books here at the Foster Care Institute. I'm sure there's a book right now ready for you. For much more on this, visit the Foster Care Institute at drjohndegarmofostercare.com. Follow me on Facebook at Dr. John DeGarmo Foster Care Institute. And of course at Twitter at Dr. John DeGarmo. If you have questions that I can answer for you about this webinar or other issues related to foster care, please feel free to email me at drjohndegarmo@gmail.com. Once again, that's drjohndegarmo@gmail.com. And you can find a contact form at our website, the Foster Care Institute, or drjohndegarmofostercare.com. When you work with youth, whether they have ADHD or they're just youth in general in foster care, whether you're caring for them, working alongside them, helping them, hey, it's tough. It's challenging. It is a task that so few are willing to do. You are making a difference. You might not see it today, but you are making a difference. You are changing the life of a youth who is suffering. You are changing the life of a youth who has suffered from trauma and anxiety. You are helping and changing the life of a youth who's crying out for help. And as a result, you're not only changing that child's life, you are changing our world. So for that, I want to say thank you for watching this webinar. Thank you for working with youth and children in foster care. And thank you for all that you do. You inspire me. For the Foster Care Institute, I'm Dr. John DeGarmo.